Rev it up and welcome to Cars Yeah, show number 2320. Today my guest is part of a family legacy that goes back to 1758 and fine leather for automobiles throughout the ages. This will be fun. Be prepared to be inspired.
This is Cars Yeah, where you'll enjoy interviews with inspiring automotive enthusiasts. Mark Green is here to provide you with a fuel injection of automotive inspiration. So get in, sit down, buckle up, and get ready for a wild ride here on Cars Yeah.
Hello, inspiring automotive enthusiasts, and welcome to Cars Yeah. Guess where I am today? Glasgow, Scotland. How cool is that? With a very special guest by the name of James Muirhead. James, welcome to Cars Yeah. Do you have any gear, and are you ready to release the clutch?
I am ready, and thank you very much for having me, Mark. This is a great honour. Thank you, and great to meet you, and looking forward to our conversation.
Well, we're going to have some fun because the legacy of your business, your family, is quite inspiring for me, and I can't wait to learn a lot more about it. What's one little thing that maybe people don't know about James Muirhead?
Wow, good question. Well, I think one thing that many people don't actually know about me is that I'm a very enthusiastic painter. I love to paint in my spare time. So yeah, as much as I'm very much engrossed in the leather industry and I've got a huge passion for cars, yeah, in my spare time I do like to paint landscapes, especially where I live. We're very fortunate living in Scotland and only a couple hours drive from the Scottish Highlands, so I don't struggle for beautiful landscapes to paint. But yeah, I'm an avid painter, and it's my passion and that's my hobby, and not many people know that.
Well, that's very cool. My father was an architect, but he loved to paint and painted his entire life. And in our home, we always had an easel set up in the corner for my sister and I, and he encouraged us to do artwork and to paint and be creative as an outlet. And I really need to pick that back up again because I've just been, you get into your career and your life and it kind of fades off. But the more I talk to people like you that do that as a way to relax and enjoy, and I live in the Pacific Northwest, there's lots to paint here, lots of fun. Yeah. What type of art, if you had to describe your type of painting, what would it be?
So it's very simplistic. I just like to capture the different lights. For me, I love it when we have many different rainy days here. The weather is always quite stormy, so I love capturing the dark blues, the purples, the really dramatic landscapes, and what effect that then has on our lochs up here in terms of the reflection from the stormy skies, and how that then influences the many colours that you see across the trees. From my favourite time of year to paint has to be autumn, when the trees start to or you call that fall, but when it starts to kind of go that sort of lovely brown tan colours in the leaves, and yeah, it's very basic. I use watercolour, so there's not that much detail to it, but it's all about capturing the mood of the skies for me. That's the main thing.
Brave man, watercolor. That was always a difficult one for me to cap. You really got to work on that. I'll tell you, there's a great place on the Cars Yeah website under my references tab where I've interviewed hundreds of automotive artists, and you can go and click on their pages and their links, and quite a wide variety of artists who do automotive. And as we are looking at each other here up in my wall, you'll see a painting of a orange Porsche Turbo that is a car I recently sold. I had it for a long time, but a listener in Russia, who is a prolific, beautiful painter, took a picture off my YouTube page and sent me that. And that's me in my car, and sent me this big, huge painting of myself. I wish he spoke English because I wanted him on the show, but he only speaks Russian, and my Russian is niet. That's about it. But, fascinating.
Can I ask you why you sold that car? It seems madness.
Oh my gosh, you're another one, huh? Okay, I'm going to say it again. It had become too precious. It had become so valuable. I'd had it for 14 years, and I like to drive my cars. And every time I drove it, I was just getting more and more anxious that it was all original. That made it even more precious, right? One of only 3 in that color. And so I just wasn't enjoying it. So I decided I need to sell it. And this has happened to me many times with my collector cars. And now I can go find something new that I'll get and drive and not care if it's raining or if I leave it at the parking lot or anything like that. So that's the simplicity simplistic version. Here's the great part. A fellow petrol head who lives about 45 minutes north of me bought the car. He has a large collection of cars. So he said, hey, Mark, it's still your car. Just come and visit anytime. It's just living in a bigger garage.
Wow, that was a good deal then. I like that. Yeah, and your back pocket's a bit bigger as well, which is a good sign. Yeah.
Well,
your wallet's a bit thicker. Yeah.
It set a record on Bring a Trailer for a car like that. The record still holds, and I immediately invested that money and it's doing really well. And now the problem is I don't want to touch it because it's doing well, and so now I'm like, So anyway, like that's a big problem. But we'll see. I'm actually going to go look at a car tomorrow. That's a possibility. So I'll let you know what ends up back in that blank space in my garage right now. Well, let me introduce you here. James Muirhead is head of sales for Automotive at Bridge of Weir Leather. He's been working there for over 17 years. James is the great-great-grandson of Arthur Muirhead, who founded their family-owned Scottish leather-making company. The same family have been involved in Bridge of Weir's leather history, which can trace its leather-making roots all the way back to 1758. Oh my goodness. Today, it operates as one of Europe's largest leather production facilities and supplies luxurious premium leather to the likes of Aston Martin, Jaguar, Land Rover, McLaren, Polestar, Lucid, Continental, Rolls-Royce, and many others. He lives in Scotland. Maybe the accent tipped you off there a little bit, and is a passionate car enthusiast, having owned high-performance cars, including BMW M2s, M3s, and Jaguar F-Types. James, I have an E46 M3 in my garage I've had since new, so we can talk a little bit about those. But first, a word from our sponsors. They keep the petrol in the tanks here, so sit tight, buckle up. We're in Scotland today, beautiful part of the world. We'll be right back. Years ago, when it was time to renew my collector car insurance policy, my carrier's rates went up. Way up, but my usage was the same and I never made a claim. I didn't even have a ticket. So what's with that? So I turned to American Collectors Insurance. Has your collector car insurance recently raised your rates for no good reason? Tired of paying an annual membership fee? Then it's time to look around and call American Collectors Insurance. I shopped around, I asked friends for recommendations, and found a winner that I can trust. And boy, I'm glad I did. I saved hundreds of dollars every year and slept better at night knowing my baby was properly insured. American Collectors Insurance have been protecting vehicles since 1976. They provided me with an agreed value insurance policy backed by their history of taking great care of their clients. What could be better than that? So give them a call and ask for a quote today. 866-ACI-YEAH. That's 866-224-9324. And protect the ones you love like I did with American Collectors Insurance. Classic car insurance designed by collectors for collectors. For several years now, you've heard me talk about Linkage Magazine. I've been a subscriber since the start. Their talented and creative team brings you a spectacular publication and website that shares the automotive passion from a worldwide perspective. Linkage is about driving, restoring, collecting, and first-hand experience at collector car auctions and more. They bring you real-world values plus rational, experienced opinions on the current markets. They cover the automotive world and the people who share our passions. And Linkage Magazine has grown, mailing you 6 issues annually. Join me on this journey with Linkage. They're geared for the automotive life. You can subscribe at linkagemag.com. So, James, we're back. I'd love for you to give us a little bit more history on this family business because, oh my goodness, European countries are so old compared to us new babies over here in the U.S. We think something that's, 50 years old is old. And Scotland, the UK, Europe is so rich in history. But if you can go back a little bit and kind of walk through the evolution of this business, and then I want to talk about what you guys are doing today. Fascinating.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I hope I don't bore you, but yeah, this is my passion, and I love speaking about it. It's all I've known from such a young age, and I'm very blessed to be born into such a family with such a proud heritage, especially within such a unique industry. You don't meet many leather makers, but yeah, as you mentioned, we can trace our family roots back to 1758, and yeah, my great grandfather, Arthur Muirhead, started the company in 1905 as Bridge of Weir. We actually supplied certain amount of cars between 1905 and 1911, but it was 1911 when my great-grandfather Arthur got on a boat across to Detroit and actually met with Henry Ford. And the Ford Model T was the first automotive contract that our family won. So it was fantastic. It was when the Ford Model Ts were manufactured over here down in Manchester. So they got talking over a glass of scotch, a cigar, and he asked Henry Ford asked my great grandfather what it was what he did for a living. Said he supplied or manufactured leather, and they said, well, I'd like your leather within my vehicles. And from 1911. We've supplied many companies, and we've been involved in some fantastic projects, from the Concorde to the Houses of Parliament here in the UK. We supplied iconic cars like the Citroen DS, the DeLorean, and Aston Martin DB5s, all the way up to present day. So we've got a very rich and sound heritage there in terms of the vehicles. But it's very interesting and a great industry to be involved in.
So, James Bond set on your leather. There you go. That's pretty cool. The Henry Ford connection is fascinating to me. I don't think a lot of people realize that Henry Ford manufactured cars all over the place. And we always thought it was just, here in the U.S. But, oh, my gosh, that's mind-boggling. I mean, that is so cool. Well, let's kind of bring it forward a little bit here to you and what you love to do, because having a family business that's been around so long, you've been in the business 17 years. Did I get that number right?
Correct. Yes, absolutely. So I started off at when I was 21, I came into the family business, and like any good fathers, my dad said to me, was that you're not just getting an office job as soon as you walk into this building. You have to go onto the factory floor, and you have to work every single process. So from the raw hide coming in all the way to a finished hide and cut part. So you understand, and you actually live and breathe every stage of that process. So you can understand, on average, from a hide that comes into our facility, there's around about 50 different processes that it has to go through, from hair removal to splitting to tanning to dyeing to finishing to embossing to cutting, you name it. You have to know exactly what goes into it, and it is a true skill. It's definitely an artisan kind of craft, as it were. So for you to be able to get your head around that is important, especially when it comes to talking about your product, filling people with confidence that you know your product inside and out. So at the time, I probably wasn't the happiest that I was having to spend 3 years on the factory floor, but it put me in good stead. And you build relationships and bonds with people in the factory that you have still got today, and remain so strong. And I'm such a better person for doing it. So I'm very thankful for having that experience. But it doesn't come without its challenges, the leather industry. But first and foremost, I think whenever I speak to anyone and they ask what I do, and I tell them that I manufacture leather, they automatically think their first thing is, oh, you kill cattle. But a very big or a massive misconception, but it's very common, is that we do not harm any animals for the production of leather. We take it as a byproduct from the meat industry. So that's probably one of the challenges that I'll touch upon later on. It's exciting, and it's always changing. And no 2 days are the same, which is a blessing, I think.
Fascinating. So when you were going through that 3-year process of learning all the aspects of the business, and brilliant move by your father, as you now know, what were a couple things that really made you go, whoa, I didn't know this? Because all of us take leather, I think, for granted. I love leather inside of a car, and I've always ordered my vehicles with leather. Even when you go into a purse store or belt store or somewhere, I mean, it's just, there's nothing like it. And there's all these different types of leather. Some are really wonderful. Some feel like plastic, and you're like, what's going on? But what are a few things that really surprised you about the entire process?
Good question. I mean, the main thing for me was a real eye opener, was the quality of the raw material. And I know that sounds silly, but where we source our hides from, it's all locally. So on average, 60 miles from field to tannery. We work very closely with the farmers and the supply chain lower down before it gets to our facility. But the raw material has such a big impact, and it pays off dividends if you have the best source of raw material. And what do I mean by that is that, obviously, like humans, the healthier our diet, the better your diet is, what you eat and what you drink, then the better your skin. And the same applies for the cattle we use, so the beef cattle from Scotland and the UK and Ireland. And because they have exposure to the finest, greenest grass in the world, they have the softest, purest water to drink, their hide is of exceptional quality. And because of that, therefore, you've got the best raw material, best starting point for you then to develop and produce the most outstanding leather in the world. Yeah, I suppose that was one. And then I suppose the next was just how much skill goes into it still. It's still a craft that you need such a keen eye and attention for detail, whether it comes to selecting the correct grades, but making sure that the hides are dyed to the correct shade, that you've got an exact match for the customer's colour. I mean, we get the most exceptional requests sometimes. That we had a McLaren Speedtail customer that went to the local supermarket and chose an aubergine, or you guys call that an eggplant, and he wanted that colour within his vehicle. So they sent that up to us, and we have to then match that colour exactly for the interior of their vehicle. And it's that skill, and all that is done by eye and by hand. And yeah, it's fantastic to see. And for that process to go from as it's just a raw hide coming into the door, and that transformation all the way through to a £2 million supercar that somebody's going to enjoy and cherish for the rest of their life. I mean, it's just something that you're honoured to be a part of, and it's fantastic.
It's brilliant. I've had the luxury of touring many car production facilities. I remember being at the Porsche factory and watching them do the process of bringing the hides out. And these days with the technology, they can scan it and find any little imperfection and take care of that or move the leather. And they were cutting the leather with water jets.
Wow. Okay.
I found fascinating. Like that's how they were cutting all the middle pieces that came out of that. So it's really, really cool. And you put leather in some amazing vehicles. You just mentioned one. So all different types of vehicles. I mean, do you think of a standard vehicle that everybody buys? Like you and I love BMWs, the M3s, but the leather in my car is really, really nice. It holds up really well, all the way up to these super high-end luxury cars. When it comes to the standards or better leather than others, how on earth do you judge that? I mean, is it all touch, feel, thickness? What goes into that?
That's a very good question. So when the hides come into us, obviously they have the hair still on them because they've just come straight off the bull. So therefore we have no idea what level of natural characteristics are on a hide. So we actually have to process the hide in terms of removing that hair. We then need to tan it. Tanning is the long-term preservation of the material. And once you've gone through those processes, you then have the ability to inspect the hide, as it were. So you're looking for growth lines, insect bites, scars, stretch marks, you name it, and based on the grade of the hide, so a hide with very little natural characteristics, as we call them, we go into a very high grade leather. So then a hide with an abundance of natural characteristics would be used for a more economy-driven leather. So once you're separating out the hides out into the different, what we call grades or selections, that will then determine what kind of leather it will then be transformed into. So you have different levels. So you'll have things like semi-aniline, which are very natural leathers that promote and enhance the leather's sort of natural characteristics, as it were. And then the hides with more characteristics on them, with heavier scarring and heavier insect bites and heavier wrinkles, you can then apply almost like a texture, like a grained effect to it to help and try and mask some of those characteristics, so you can produce a more economy-driven leather. The challenge you have with the higher grade stuff is that with every two, let's say you have 100 cattle in a field, you'll be lucky if maybe 5% of those have a very low number of natural characteristics. It's very difficult to control, obviously, how the cattle fight with each other or scratch themselves against a tree or a fence post. So they're very hard to come by. There's few and far between. One of my favourite projects to work on was the Aston Martin 177 supercar that they manufactured. And Aston Martin said to us that they only wanted golden hides, as it were. And golden hides were like, what is this term? Do you mean we want hides with absolutely no natural characteristics on it? We don't want any scars. We don't want any net wrinkles. They just have to be perfect. So we spent ages and ages, because as you can imagine how many hides you have to go through to try and find those golden hides. So it took a long time to even build up to one car, because one Aston Martin alone takes between 6 and 8 hides per vehicle, because it has so much leather, from the seats to the headliners to to the IPs, to the to the A pillars, to the B pillars, to the C pillars. It's everywhere, which is fantastic, and that's why Aston Martin interiors are so beautiful in my opinion. But yeah, they were difficult to come by, and it was a great challenge to work on that project. But and I hope that's given you some sort of insight into the different grades of leather, but it's quite difficult to explain. I'd like to have you over in the factory and I could put some hides on the table and actually show you physically the difference between the grades. And you're right, there is different touches to them. The higher grade leathers tend to be a little bit more silky and soft, and then the more economy driven leathers tend to be firmer and a wee bit more uniform and a bit more consistent. So it just depends. Different horses for courses.
Yeah, golden hides. I love it. And you mentioned the aubergine color that went into that vehicle. How do you dye the hides? Is there some special, is it soaked in color or sprayed on, or how's this done?
Yeah, so there's two stages to the process. So the first stage is that we dye the hides, you're correct, and we try and dye the hides as close to the end customer colour as possible. But when we're doing that initial match, when we get sent the aubergine, we will then do a hand spray, a pigment spray, just on the A surface or the grain layer of the hide, that top surface, just to get that exact match. If the customer's happy, they sign off that colour, that's when we need to try and dye the hides as close to that aubergine or end customer colour as possible. We use water-based dye, and you're correct, it's like a big drum, a tumble drum. It takes up to about 200 hides at a time, and it's a long process, about 22 hours, and you put the hides in, they soak in a bath, you add the dye stuff, and it just takes a long time just for the dye stuff to penetrate the hide all the way through. But it is very important that you start with that original base dye colour, and then when it gets through to the finishing plant, we apply a pigment match to the A surface of the leather, and that's what gets it exact. Talking of other stories of matching things, it was actually Rob Dickinson from Singer Vehicle Design came over with to visit us, and he came off the plane with a yellow handbag, and he said he gave it to his designer to carry for him. I didn't think he was too happy carrying it, and he gave it to us, and he said, I would like you to match this yellow because I've got a very special project coming up. So we were okay, no problem at all, and we matched this yellow for him, and it ended up being the yellow in the first production Singer DLS. So if you've seen the white Singer with the yellow interior, that was Rob coming over on a plane with a handbag. We matched it, and then that's the end result right there. Yeah. So
I'll have to next time I see Rob. He's been on the show a few times. I'll say, "Hey, where's your yellow handbag, dude?"
Yeah.
see what he says. Now, my last question when it comes to leather before we get into your world is caring for leather. I've heard all sorts of different things about different ways to care for leather. You put an application of some kind of leather care on when the car's warm because the hide expands, contracts. Your opinion on what's the best thing people can do with their leather interiors?
Good question. And I think these companies that sell these leather care kits are going to hate me after I tell you this, but modern day leather, the leather that we manufacture, is extremely durable, and the finishing systems and everything that we put on them means that they're designed and they're built to last. For us, the only way that you should maintain or look after leather is that you use a microfiber cloth, you use a tiny little bit of water, maybe 10 parts water to 1 part, maybe just household detergents, like household soap that you would use for the dishes, and you use that on the leather in soft circular motions. The days of things like having to feed leather, the only reason why you had to do that back in the olden days was due to the fact that the leathers were vegetable tanned and therefore used to dry out. Nowadays, that the leathers have a moisture content between 12 and 15%, and that will tend to last for the full lifetime of that leather, and without you having to put any additional care or treatment onto it, because we take care of that on our side. So modern day leathers, I would say you don't need to put much care and attention to it. Just if you do spill something on it, just make sure that you clean it off relatively quickly, otherwise it will stain.
Yeah, and leave the crayons and marker pens at home when the kids are in the back seat. Most definitely. You know, I would assume in your life you've had what I call a driving inspiration, mentor, someone very influential to you. Is there somebody like that?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is going to probably sound quite corny or cheesy, but it's actually my father, I would say, is probably been my biggest inspiration in life. I mean, he did so much for the leather industry. He did so much for me, my family. He was awarded an OBE, which is an Officer of the Order of the British Empire. He has to go and meet the Queen, and it's almost through the same process as being knighted, but it's not as prestigious as getting a knighthood. But it's not far off it. So he's always been a great role model for me, just in terms of his work ethic, his passion, his enthusiasm for making sure that we learned as much as we did within the business, and he taught us everything that I know today. And yeah, he's been a huge role model, not only for me but my older brother as well. So that would be my choice. Yeah,
I would imagine too, with a legacy and a family legacy that goes far back, there's a bit of a challenge with that, and the pressures of continuing that, making it successful and growing and expanding into the world that is ever changing with technology and so forth. And it's a great little segue into my next question, the challenge question. And you touched on one challenge is the perception of leather. Well, you're a cow killer, if you will. However, I like the way you put that. You're using all the products of the animal and using it for great good. And also, I would assume there's some recyclability. Is there any of that with leather?
I don't know if you're aware, but when a hide arrives at our facility, a raw hide, it comes in and it weighs about 45 kilos, and a finished hide weighs 4 kilos. So 90% of that historically was waste, and that used to go to landfill. And obviously, we want to move away from any landfill contribution because it's just not sustainable. So what we decided back in 2003 was to open up our thermal energy plant. And what that allowed us to do was recover the solid waste from the process. So all the unwanted hair, unwanted proteins from the hide. And we convert that into a steam through a process called pyrolysis and gasification. And so that steam we then in turn use to heat the water from our very own loch at the back of the factory. We also use that same steam to dry the leather later on in the process. The fat that we remove from the bee surface of the raw hide as it comes in, we can render down into a biodiesel, and it can actually run electronic generators on site as well. So we can actually create our own gas and electricity from the byproducts from the leather manufacturing process, which is really, really crucial. Also because we then cut inside, so when we have a finished hide, that's approximately about 4.5 square meters, we then have the patterns for the seat, and then we cut. So usually you normally only get about a 60% utilization from a hide. Again, 40% you would think would go to scrap. However, we can break this down and again put it back into our thermal energy plant. We also have the facility on site for all the water we use. So approximately we use 1.6 million litres of water a day. So that's a hell of a lot of water. But we do live in Scotland, and it does rain every second of every minute and every hour over here. So we have no shortage. So it's really important for us as well to recycle that water, so it can be discharged back down into the system. So we have our ultrafiltration plant that allows us to recycle 40% of our processed water as well. And once we've installed our solar panel farm next year, we will be a net zero manufacturing company with zero impact, and that's not through offsetting either. So that is leather for you, and you could have a carbon neutral leather supplier into these great OEMs, and they've all got really ambitious targets to achieve. And people do ask us, have you ever thought of using or manufacturing a leather alternative? But in order for you to get a man-made leather, you need to mix it with quite a high rate of polyurethane, no less than 70%. So for us, it doesn't sit well with us in terms of leather is great in terms of a sustainable product. It's a recycled product because you're taking it from the meat industry. And also leather at the end of its life is biodegradable. It will disappear. However, all these alternatives that are 70% plus plastic, they will not break down in the future. So it's not a good option for us. And therefore, just because something may be sort of a vegan interior doesn't necessarily make it sustainable, and that's the message that we have to try and get across, and that's the challenge, because a lot of people just think, as I mentioned to you previously, as soon as they hear what I do, they go, "You make leather, that means you must kill cattle," and that's just sadly not the case.
It's fascinating. I'm so glad you shared all that because I think a lot of people don't know all this. And the fact that you'll be net zero because of recycling and reusing is brilliant. So bravo to you and your company and the industry of what you guys are doing. Special vehicles. I like to ask people to share one special vehicle in their life. Has there been a car like that for you?
Yes, and I have to say it was my F-Type, my Jaguar F-Type. I didn't have the 5-litre supercharged, unfortunately. I only had the 3-litre supercharged, but it was fantastic. What a noise! I think when the Jaguar and Land Rover team, when they developed those exhaust notes, especially on the SVRs, are absolutely fantastic. They sound otherworldly. But for me, that car was amazing. I do love a rear-wheel drive car as well. Some people say that's a bit of a silly choice, living in such a wet country, but it's always puts you on the edge of your seat when you're approaching a corner or a roundabout and you can feel that back end starting to twitch. I think for me, that's what driving is all about. And that would be my car that I miss the most if I were honest with you. Closely followed by the M3 as well. I had two M3s. I had the F90, and then the one before that, I can't remember its code, but it was the V8. I had the manual V8 M3, and that was that was again just the noise off it was fantastic. It wasn't any of this sort of fake noises coming from the exhaust. You could hear that rumble right up in front of the steering wheel, and yeah, it was probably the closest I'll ever get to owning a sort of American muscle car, as it were.
Nothing like a V8. Yeah, that's the era that came after the E46 that I have with the inline six. So awesome. So I'm going to be a car psychologist a little bit here for you. I'm going to crawl into your head. If you were reincarnated as a vehicle, what would you be and why?
Great question. And I think I would be a Land Rover Defender. And the reason being is that not very pretty on the eye. Some people love them, some people hate them. But great outdoors. I do love the outdoors. There's nothing that pleases me more than going out into the Scottish mountains and up in the Scottish hills. So yeah, great in the countryside. And yeah, practical as well. So yeah, that's me. That's how I would sum myself up.
Very well done. I'm not surprised, given the part of the world you live in as well. It paints a beautiful picture in the beautiful part of the country you live in. It's one of those rolling through the hills. So brilliant. I love it. How about great reading? We love books here. Is there a great book you could share?
The book that I read last that I absolutely loved, there's a journalist that I really, really like. It's called Louis Theroux. I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but it was his autobiography. It's called You've Got to Get Through This. And he's a very quirky journalist, quite kind of geeky and kind of awkward in his interviewing style. And it's all about his rise to fame through the BBC. And he ended up probably responsible for some of the most iconic journalism that's been broadcast on TV, and I just find him fascinating. He's an excellent person, yeah, and I think if anyone would get the chance to read that book, I would definitely recommend that.
A new book recommended here. I love it. That's hard to do after all the guests I've had on the show. And there's a great place on my website called Guest Recommended Books with over 3,000 books listed there. So you brought a new one. So let's go on the ultimate drive. I'm an enabler here. I'm going to provide you with any car in the world. You can take it anywhere in the world, and you can take anybody with you, including somebody from the past who's no longer with us. That opens up some unique opportunities. So what does this ultimate drive look like for a guy like you?
Right, okay, so my favourite car in the world has to be the 1970s Lancia Stratos. That is my favourite car. I love it. I just think the way it looks, it's the wheel arches, everything, it's just so aggressive. I don't know whether or not I'd fit in it, mind you, but
they're pretty tiny cars, aren't they?
Yeah. But yeah, I love them, and I just think they look so iconic and so beautifully designed. And the person that I would love to go with is the very famous comedian Billy Connolly. I don't know if you've ever heard of him.
I've heard of the name, yes.
Yeah, but he's hilarious, and he's a big hero of mine in terms of just what he's done from working in the Glasgow shipyards in Clydebank and then making his way up to international stardom. And he'd be fascinating, he'd be hilarious, and no doubt great company.
Yeah, that would be pretty cool. Have you seen the prototype, the Lancia Stratos HF0?
Yes, I have. And yes, that's on the bucket list. That and a Singer Porsche would be my 2-car garage. Yeah.
Yeah, I tell Rob, I said, every time I waste $2 on a lottery ticket, I put one word on the back of it, Singer.
Yes. Uh-huh.
And
Yeah,
he goes, well, Mark,
yeah.
when you win that lottery, you're still going to have to wait 3 or 4 years like everybody else. I'll tell you, the guy that bought my Orange Crush, my 87 Turbo, he just took delivery of his Singer. And so he's got one. Yeah, I know. Some people just have it all, It's just, but I've got to go up and have him take me a ride. Maybe he'll toss me the keys. Hey, Tom, what do you think? Maybe. We'll see.
Fingers crossed.
That would be kind of cool. Yeah, I love those cars. And to have a bespoke car made the way you want. I mean, that's the best of all worlds. You have taken us on a wonderful drive today, James. I'm so happy that we connected. I want to do a shout out. Thank you to our mutual friend, James Billington at Influence Associates. Those guys there have brought me so many fascinating guests. So thank you, James, for another all-star that you brought to the Cars Yeah alumni team here. This is very cool. Before I let you go, could you share maybe some words of inspiration or wisdom with us?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what's got me through my life, and something my father has always sort of drilled into us from a young age, is always work hard. I think nothing in life comes easy. Don't be afraid of change. Make sure you embrace it, and make sure you have a plan, stick to that plan, and be patient.
Yeah, well advised words. My father, I remember when I was young, telling me, you know what, Mark, you may not be the smartest guy in the room, and I always wonder why he said that, but he said you can always outwork the other guy. And so, yeah, there's something to that. But thanks, Dad, for those words of encouragement. How can people learn more about your company?
So we're all over every social media platform. So even just type into Google Bridge of Weir Leather. Come and follow us. Follow us on Twitter. Follow us on Instagram. Follow us on LinkedIn. Please, just put it into Google and find out some of the fantastic things we're doing. We're highly innovative. We're a very historic company, but we're definitely not dictated by our heritage. We're very forward thinking. We're very progressive. And yeah, we are producing the world's most sustainable material for interiors, and it's a fantastic journey to be on. But this is just the start of this amazing journey. And not only will we be carbon neutral or manufacturing at zero next year, we're looking now to be carbon positive and actually giving back into the local housing and creating more energy than we can consume. And so we're actually making a positive impact on the planet as well. And please keep on eating those steaks so we can have some rawhides.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. It's brilliant what you guys are doing. My hat's off to you. I think it's wonderful. I can't wait to. I've got to make a trip over to Scotland. I've only been to the London area, but I've got to get up to Scotland. I live where it rains a lot, so rain doesn't scare me at all. But I'd love to come and see your facility someday. My son took a trip to Scotland years ago. He goes, Dad, you got to go. It's magical. So I got to get myself over there. Yeah, check it out. Bridge of Weir, Weir Leather. God, you'll be blown away by what these guys have done. Absolutely brilliant. James, thanks for being so generous today with your time and your expertise and sharing the history of this iconic brand with us today. Until you and I talk again, I'll see you hopefully sitting on some fine leather down the road.
Cheers. Thank you.
Thank you. This was wonderful. 20, 50, or 100 years from now, will there be a workforce to care for the collector vehicles we love? With auto shop programs disappearing across the country, it's a question we enthusiasts have to ask. That's why I support the RPM Foundation, which exists to ensure that the critical skills necessary to preserve and restore these vehicles aren't lost to time. One of the many ways RPM, which is short for Restoration, Preservation, and Mentorship, is accomplishing this goal is through workforce development initiatives. The RPM apprenticeship program enables the next generation of artisans to earn a living while they learn the craft of restoring and preserving these vehicles directly from industry professionals. The Endangered Skills Program documents the process of masters training future craftspeople on a variety of critical skills in danger of being lost forever. For more information on how the RPM Foundation is driving the future of the collector vehicle skills trade, visit RPM Foundation today. They're one of the charities of choice here on Cars Yeah!
Thank you so much for joining us on today's ride here at Cars Yeah! Drive on over to carsyeah.com to find show notes and inspiring automotive fun. Download your free copy of Filler Up, a fun book filled with gorgeous photographs of fuel filler fun, including quotes from more inspiring automotive enthusiasts. Download your copy today, and we'll see you next time on Cars Yeah!